Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. My guest today is Rae Hoffman. So Rae Hoffman, also known in the online world as Sugar Rae, is an affiliate marketing veteran and the CEO of Pushfire, a search marketing agency. She's also the outspoken and unfiltered author of Sugar Rae blog. But what brought her to Good Life Project today is something very different. In November 2012, Rae's 15-year-old son, CJ, passed away. Rae found profound wisdom in the way that her son lived and what he taught her, and that led to a keynote before thousands of marketers in the summer of 2013 that for the first time in her life had nothing to do with business, or so it seemed. So we're going to explore that because in the end I think it had everything to do with it if in fact you look at that as life. But you're known in this world as kind of like a badass, insanely smart, plain spoken, like if something's on your mind, you say, you know, you don't hold back, and you're like, so a lot of people come to you because they love that, because you're incredibly successful at what you do professionally. You're always on the cutting edge, and they love your voice. And you've spoken a ton at conferences all over the place. You've got this tremendous reputation. You built companies, and that's sort of like when you're in the public facing, you has always been that.
Yeah.
Right. But then the end of last year happens, and before that, you had written about CJ. Mm-hmm. Right, so, but I think most people, unless you've been following you fairly religiously for years, probably a lot of people never really knew anything about it. And then you shared a post at the end of last year, you know, sort of like saying what's going on. So I want to go through this a little bit with you, and then you shared another post, which actually we're going to spend a lot of time exploring. But tell me about CJ.
I was 20 years old when I had him, and he was born perfectly healthy. And so when he was about 2 weeks old, I'd woke up one morning, really early in the morning, and if you've ever had anybody who's parents, you know that, you know, when you have a 2-week-old baby, they wake you up 19 times in the middle of the night. And I woke up and it was daylight out, and that immediately sent alarm bells off in me that he hadn't woke up, or woke me up at all through the night. And so I looked at his bassinet and it was literally shaking back and forth. And so I walked over and I looked inside of it, and he was doing this thing with his arm, and just constantly, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get him to stop doing it. So I called his doctor up, and I had admittedly called his doctor a few times in the few days before this because he was acting a little weird. But you know, I was a young first-time mom. And so I called the doctor and said, you know, he's doing this thing with his arm and I can't get him to stop. And the doctor asked to speak to my then husband, and told my then husband that I had new mom syndrome, that I needed to realize nothing was wrong with my son. And, you know, essentially very nicely to stop calling him constantly. So I kind of looked at it and I went, screw this. And we took him to the hospital. And of course, he stops doing it the second before we walk through the door. So, you know, they put us in this room, and because we had come into the emergency room, you know, they ran blood tests, et cetera, you know, to kind of cover their rears in that respect. But of course, they called the pediatrician, and I'm sure the pediatrician was like, you know, she's a paranoid new mom. And so all of a sudden he started doing it again. And I went out into the hallway and found the male nurse that was in the hallway and said, you know, he's doing that thing again. You should probably come in and check it. And he walked in the door and he took one look at him, turned sheet white, ran out of the room, and the next thing I heard was them announcing a code white over the loudspeakers, which is the same thing as a code blue, except it's a child. So people just stormed the room, and they started doing all these tests, and they said, you know, oh, we're going to test for meningitis. They did the spinal tap. It's not meningitis. And the children's hospital was an hour and a half away. They couldn't bay flight him because it turned out that what was going on was he was having seizures. They counted after he entered the hospital over 300 in that first day. So they rushed him to the children's hospital by ambulance. And I remember them looking at us and going, only one person can go. And I always joke that, you know, I would have been a stampede of elephants over anybody else that tried to get in that ambulance. We got to the children's hospital and they opened the doors, and it was seriously like an episode of like ER. You know, they jumped down, they're running down the hallway. I'm running down the hallway behind them. We get into this room, and you know, there's tons of people around, and they explained to us he's having seizures, and they were going to give him this medication to stop the seizures. And they said, you know, just so you know, it takes time for them to build up tolerance to these medications. So there's a chance that he could stop breathing. And if he does, we're prepared for it. You know, it'll take him a few days to adjust to the medication, and then he'll be able to breathe on his own again. And so sure enough, less than 24 hours after we were there, he stopped breathing. He was on a ventilator for 2 weeks. They told us the entire time he just had a seizure disorder. He'd have to take medication for the rest of his life, but other than that, he'd be fine. And it's funny being on that side of the fence because, at the time, I thought that was the worst thing that could ever happen. Like, oh my God, my kid has seizures. This is going to be horrible. He's going to be made fun of in school. He might not be able to get a driver's license. And so 2 weeks later, he came off the ventilator, and he had a hematoma on his head that he'd had since birth. And they said if it didn't go away, it was no big deal, but if it didn't go away, they might have to drain it. And so before we left the hospital, I said, look, I've been here for 5 weeks. I just want to go home. So y'all need to check that hematoma and figure out if anything's going on with it, because I basically don't ever want to see this place again. And when they did the CAT scan to check the hematoma, that was when they found the brain damage. And so he had, the doctor had come in and they explained to us that they knew why he was having the seizures. And they had told us all along if they could figure out why he was having the seizures, they could probably stop him. So we're like, fantastic, like why is he having the seizures? And they told us that they had found significant areas of brain damage on both sides of his head. And, we're looking at him and he still cries, he still eats, and we're thinking, well, this can't be that bad. And the neurologist came in later on that day to show us the CAT scan and kind of go over the diagnosis with us. And he had put up, by then they had done an MRI, and he put up the MRI and he said, as you can see, there's a very clear difference between live brain, or, okay brain and damaged brain. And I looked up at the screen and I said, yeah, so all the little white spots are the damage? And he said, no, that's what's left. It's one of those things that you ask the weirdest questions. So, is he going to walk? In my professional opinion, no. Is he going to talk? In my professional opinion, no. I asked if he was going to throw a football. I don't know what made me think that after those first two answers, there would be a different answer to that one. But yeah, so they basically told us that he was going to be severely multiply handicapped for the rest of his life, that in their professional opinion, he would never smile, he would never know anything about the world around him, and he would never know who we were. Essentially, what they told us was that he was basically going to be one step above a vegetable. And I hate that word, but most people kind of understand in that regard. That was the beginning of an entire new life for me.
Wow. So, how do you even begin to process that?
You punch beds a lot. There was a local Ronald McDonald House, and by that point, like I said, we had been spending weeks at the hospital. And I remember I came back to the Ronald McDonald House, and you sign a waiver when you move in there that that Ronald McDonald House can communicate with the hospital. And so I came back. It was late at night by the time I came back, and the house had been notified, that we got really bad news. And we came back, and they were really, really sweet. And I just remember going up to my room, and I cried for probably 2 weeks, and I thought, I can't do this. And it's one of those things, anytime that I hear somebody say that they can't do something, and I'm like, if you would have asked me 2 weeks before this happened to him, if I could have handled it, my answer would have been, hell no. And even 2 weeks after, I kept thinking like, there's no way, but, I had this baby who didn't look any different, didn't act any different, he was an infant. And he seemed to recognize my voice. I was pretty sure that he did. And I think it was just a matter of, one day at a time. He was just very small, and it was kind of like baby steps acclimating to the new role of having a child with those disabilities. And I think, there was some hope in the beginning that maybe they were wrong. That your kid was going to be the one they wrote the medical papers about. And I think that over time, you learn to let go of that hope and kind of accept your reality, and it comes in a way where I think you're able to process it mentally and kind of move forward with it, or at least it did for me.
Right. And it's, any parent is would listen to a story like this, and immediately what you start to think about is your own kid. So it's just a horrifying scenario, but you found, it sounds like so much strength over time, and in fact, it's from what I understand. Also, it was really, it led to so much wisdom for you. It led to so much life experience, and it led to your career.
Yes.
In a large way. So talk to me a little bit about the tie-in there.
So after CJ had his, CJ had actually had a bilateral stroke, which is extremely rare. It's rare in adults, much less in children. And what that means is he had a stroke on both sides of his brain at the same time. So his outcome as far as children who have stroke is on the very, very severe side. Most kids that have strokes do not have as bad of an outcome as he did. And so they told me that the likelihood of me meeting another stroke parent, much less another bilateral stroke parent, was like way out there.
So you're like alone in the world in addition to this.
Yeah, you know, they basically just said, you know, like, you're an anomaly. The way they described it to me was he won the lottery, and a really bad thing. And so my dad had sent me this computer, and I'd never been on the internet before, and it's funny because it's like 1997, and you would think that, you know, now I'm like this, you know, the internet's my life, but I'd never been on the internet before. And my dad sent me an old office computer that he had and said, you know, this will help you so that maybe you can find some research, you know, on how to help him. And so, you know, I had my little dial-up, and I went on there and I started finding articles on pediatric stroke, which was hard because there wasn't a lot of information at the time. And I basically created this web page through Homestead, and it had CJ's story on it, and had a few pictures and, you know, what have you. And I don't even know why I created it. It's not like I had a ton of people to show it to, or, you know, maybe it was somewhat self-therapeutic. I don't know. And so I started getting these emails all of a sudden from other parents, and they were like, oh, my daughter had a stroke too, or oh, my son had a stroke too. And it was kind of like, wow, there's other people, and I couldn't figure out how these people were finding me. And this was pre-Google when I started this. And so somehow the Yahoo directory had picked up the page, and because I had some links to pediatric stroke articles on there, they had considered it a resource. And so long story short, I ended up founding the first international support group for parents and families of pediatric stroke survivors to ever register with the American Heart Association. And so during my time in running that, you know, we had over 5,000 families come through. I ended up meeting other parents that had bilateral strokes, you know, and USA Today was doing a story. And so they had found my website, and they'd contacted me, and they interviewed me for the article. And after that, we got a flood. And it was like, you know, the media gets on a topic, and that's their, you know, cause of the month. So all of a sudden, I was being contacted by Good Morning America and all these like major news outlets. And they were like, we're looking for a kid between this age and this age, you know, that had a stroke, etc. But, you know, it put a lot of spotlight on it. So we were like, the more the merrier. And I was spending about 40 to 60 hours a week running this support group. And I thought, you know, there's got to be a way I can make some money doing this. And my then husband was a construction worker.
By the way, just to make it clear, because some people, like, they're going to hear that as there's got to be a way I can make some money on the back of this. It's not what you're talking about.
Oh, no. There was, I was thinking there,
it's like you're devoting so much.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking career at the time. I was thinking, you know, there has got to be a way that I have got to make some money from this, you know, from somehow online to be able to support what I'm doing with the support group.
So you can keep doing it essentially and not have to go work another job.
Exactly. I mean, I was a waitress when CJ was first diagnosed. And for the first few years, he was in and out of the hospital nonstop. So there was no way I could have held a regular job. But, you know, as that started to come to a close where he was more stable and wasn't in the hospital all the time, you know, my ex-husband worked 60 hours a week and busted his rear end, you know, and barely brought home enough for us to pay the rent and, you know, keep the electric on. So it was kind of, you know, I wanted to figure out a way that I can make some money online and still be able to do the support group. And I definitely, as a matter of fact, that was how I found affiliate marketing. Was I actually wasn't comfortable at all with the idea of trying to, you know, in any way profit from this support group. So I started looking for ways, you know, like, how do people make money online? And I found affiliate marketing. And I found a program called Cognigen. They did long distance services. You know, this was back before everybody had unlimited long distance. And so they did long distance service. And so if you got somebody to sign up, then you got a percentage of that commission. And so, you know, they had a message board where all these people were talking about it. And Cognigen actually to the outside probably looked more like MLM because they had several tiers, but it was all affiliate marketing. There was no sign up fee to join. You know, you only got paid if you sold things. And so I was on the forum that they had, and I said, you know, how are you guys making money with this online? And they said, well, you need to build a website. So I thought, okay. So I went and I learned HTML and like hand coded the ugliest vanilla website you will ever see in your life. And I came back and I said, okay, I built a website. What do I do now? And they said, well, you're going to need to learn SEO. And again, you're talking at this point, it's either still pre-Google or Google wasn't Google. Like nobody knew what it was, but it was out there. And so they're like, you're going to need to learn this SEO thing. And so at the time it was like title tags, keywords, and I think, links had just started, right after I got into it was when links came about. And so I went and, did a bunch of research on it, came back and I said, okay, I've got my title tags, my keywords, blah, 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 the stuff that I did. And I got a message from this guy, a private message. And he said, did you really learn all that in 2 weeks? And I said, yeah. And he said, I think you may actually have like a knack for this. And he said, if you're game for it, I'd love to introduce you to a few people that can kind of help you hone your skills and figure this out. And that guy's name was Mike Mackin. And at the time I had no idea that the guy was actually a legend in the affiliate space. So he kind of saw me on this message board and, picked me up out of the message board. And I'm very thankful for the fact that they never gave me fish. They taught me how to fish. They showed me where the lake was, said, there's your pole, there's your lure, go for it. And at the time I had thought, if I could make $1,000 a month, like we would have been ballers, it would have been so much money. And so that was my end goal. Like if I work really, really hard for a really long time, maybe I can hit the $1,000 a month mark from online. And it actually turned out that I was really good at the SEO part of things. And within 6 months, I was out earning my ex-husband. And it was insane to me, that you could sit at home in your pajamas on a computer cart in your kitchen. And to me, it absolutely changed our lives because, CJ would need a bath chair and it was $300. And, before I found affiliate marketing and online marketing, that might as well have been $30,000 to us. We had a hard time paying our $64 phone bill. So to suddenly be earning this money and it was just like, oh, he needs a therapy chair, boom, there it is. Oh, he needs this type of over-the-counter medication, boom, there's the payment for it. So it was really shocking to me to find out that this internet thing was good for more than research. And, good for more than message boards and IRC, and that there was a way to make a living.
I'm glad you brought that up too, and I want to get back to CJ's story and sort of like this really cool thing that you shared. But as we're here, so I might as well touch on it. There's so much hype around the affiliate marketing world that hey, this is the thing that's going to get you stupid rich in the world. And what I love is that you're saying, you're, for some rare people, maybe. But for the average person, if you could just supplement what you're doing, stay at home, and have enough coming in so that those things that you need for your family, you're good. You don't have to worry about just the stuff that you really need.
Yep. I think the once a year vacation for Disney World.
I think that's the much bigger story. That's not really sold in that whole space. Maybe it is. You're much more connected with it than I am. But
yeah, the whole make $10,000 a month, and don't work and sit in your pajamas. It's kind of for the first, I'd say 4 to 5 years that I did this, I worked nonstop. It was kids in the morning, work, kids in the afternoon. I'd stay up till 4 in the morning and I'd get up again at 7 o'clock in the morning and start the whole thing over again. And I really worked a lot those first, 5 or 6 years. And I think A, lot of people don't see that. B, people want to sell you the dream. Right, it's like when you see those people that are selling those courses of how to make $10,000 in your sleep and they show you those commission checks. And I always want to look at people and go, those commission checks are only from them selling you this dream. They haven't actually made those commission checks selling socks or boots or long distance services. They've made those checks by selling you the dream. And I think that affiliate marketing, not everybody that gets into it is ever going to be, back in the day, we used to say anybody that made 5 figures a month from affiliate marketing was a super affiliate. Not everybody's going to be a super affiliate, but not everybody wants to be a super affiliate. I actually just got back from a conference where there were a bunch of, moms there, and a lot of them were making, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month from their blogs, and
so great for so many families, so many people.
Absolutely, and it gave them the ability to provide things like youth football and gymnastics classes and things along those lines. So I think everybody has their own vision of success, and I think there are a lot of people that can find success with affiliate marketing. I just agree with you that it's not always you're going to be in a mansion.
Yeah. And also, I just think, because I do believe that there's a lot of value in it, and a lot of people could really help supplement their family incomes and things like that. But I think a lot of people are scared away, but because of all the big, there's something just feels so icky but that's not the whole. That's one spin on it, but that's not actually what it is. So,
well, I always joke that the only industry I know that has a worse reputation than personal injury lawyers is like the SEO, affiliate marketing, online marketing community. And there are a lot of snake oil salesmen. There are a lot of affiliates that don't care if it's a good product, don't care how they promote it, will take any loophole they can, and
unfortunately
they give the rest of us that are doing it legitimately and honestly kind of a bad rap.
Right.
So.
And there are people doing it legitimately and honestly also, and a lot of them. So let's circle back to CJ though, and the story and where it's brought you. So so you basically completely, it gives you your career. You figure out how to build this in a way where you can stay home, take care of the needs that you need, and life starts to go on to a certain extent, and you move through it. And we sort of zoom the lens up to the end of 2012.
Yeah, it was, it's, in the post that we're going to talk about later, one of the biggest things I said, was regret tomorrow doesn't always come. And, the last year of his life, so from age 14 to, the middle of 15, he had been in the hospital twice where it was bad. And by bad, I mean, my ex-husband had said to me, no, he's fine, et cetera. And the doctors were like, no, we think he's going to make it out. But I mean, it was touch and go for a while in those last 2 hospitalizations. And the doctor had said to me, and just for some background, I was a single mom up until 3 years ago, and so CJ, when he hit about 11 years old, he was officially too big for me to lift. I couldn't lift him. I had messed up my knee several times. My back was having a ton of problems. And, the doctors kept saying to me, it's probably time to place him. It's probably time to put him somewhere. And I just thought, no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I don't want him somewhere where he's not, surrounded by people that love him. And so my ex-husband, who, I will give him a massive amount of credit, he has always been a fantastic dad to CJ. And he kind of stepped up and said, financially I can't do it, but physically I can. And so, we came to an agreement where I would cover the financial and he would cover the physical. And so I flew out there to see him very often. My kids went down there for the summer with their dad, and so they got to spend time with him. And so flash forward to, he's been hospitalized twice in the last year. Both times it's been dire, but I've talked with the doctor and I've talked to my ex-husband, and they're like, no, he's going to be fine. He's going to make it out. And the last time that he was in the hospital for a serious hospitalization, I talked to his neurologist who had him since he was about 9 months old. And he had said to me, he's going to make it out of the hospital this time. He said, but if he ever gets pneumonia, if he ever enters the hospital with pneumonia, you need to get down here. And so I said, okay, and I knew that, the likelihood that CJ was ever going to make it to 18 was something we knew wasn't likely. And so I had a younger son during this time, who's now 2, and I wanted to make sure that he met CJ. So we were planning a trip there, the entire family, in December, and on November 29th, my ex-husband called me. It was, I don't remember the exact time, but it was about 8 o'clock at night or so. And he called and he said, he's in the hospital, and I could hear that he was crying. And he doesn't ever cry about, he's always the positive one, that nothing's wrong. And so just the fact that he was as upset as he was kind of, threw me for a loop. And he said he's in the hospital with pneumonia. And I said, okay, let me call you right back. So I hung up the phone, called to book the plane to go out there. The first flight I could get was the next morning. And I called the hospital to talk to the hospital, and I, spoke with the nurse, and I said, how's he doing, et cetera. I'm going to be there in the morning. And the nurse made it sound like he was fine, like he was stable. And, she said they were going to transfer him to the children's hospital. And I said, is he like okay enough to make the transfer? And she goes, oh, he's fine. He's stable, And so I hung up the phone, and I looked at my now husband, and I said, Chris sounds like it's really bad, but the nurse made it sound like, he was A-okay. And I said, I just can't wait to get there tomorrow morning so I can see for myself. And about 30 minutes later, the phone rang. And I will tell you that as soon as I saw my ex-husband's name on the phone, I knew because I'd just spoken to him. He wouldn't call me back that quick. And I picked up the phone, and he was hysterical. And he just kept saying, he's gone, he's gone. He stopped breathing, he's gone. And it's one of those things that no matter how much, I thought I was prepared. We knew his whole life that he was not going to outlive us. And you think that you are like super prepared for that to happen. And when people, would ask me like, I don't want to be rude, but what's his lifespan? And, I could talk about it, not necessarily with ease, but with acceptance. And so when he said that, I just remember that my knees came out from underneath me. And I was instantaneously hysterical. Could not talk. And my current husband was out on the back porch, and I just walked over and started banging on the window. And he came in, took one look at me, and he knew. And so it was kind of it took me about 45 minutes before I could have any type of composure to even speak. And I remember sitting there, and it was I finally calmed down, where it was I could at least breathe. Yeah. And I thought, I have to tell my kids. Mm-hmm. So, and we called them downstairs, and my daughter's very much like me. I'm not a very emotional person. I don't, I tend to be a doer. Something happens, okay, what can I do? What can I do to keep myself busy? And so, my daughter took it in the same fashion, and my 9-year-old just absolutely lost it. And so the next morning, I'm sitting on this flight, flying out to Tampa, only instead of getting to see him, I land, and within 45 minutes, I'm at a funeral home, deciding what to do and picking out urns and setting up funeral arrangements. And it was, and I say this, and I think it's very hard for somebody that doesn't have a child like him to understand, but it's you have all these emotions going on. So you have, the sadness that he's gone and that you're not going to see him again. You have the anger at why did this have to happen to him in the first place? And then there is that slight bit of relief in the regards to he's no longer in pain. He no longer has to struggle to just exist, something the rest of us take for granted every day. And I kind of said to myself, this is the first decision he's ever made in his life. He decided he'd had enough. And so I just kind of told myself that in the days that I had to get through the funeral and when I wrote the eulogy. It's funny, I've never had something come out of me so fast in my entire life, and I write a lot. And I sat down and it just flowed out. And that was one of the things I said in the eulogy, that, we couldn't be mad. We shouldn't even be sad. We should just respect the fact that he's never been able to make a decision in his entire life. And this was his first and only decision he ever made. And that, we just kind of have to respect it. But it definitely flipped my whole world upside down, because for 15 years, he was the reason for everything that I did. He was the reason I worked as hard as I did. He was the reason that I needed to make money. He was the reason, that I needed to grow my company. And it was very disarming to have kind of your, I don't want to call it my reason for existence, but my entire drive, like the entire force behind everything I do, to have that suddenly gone. It was very, very hard to get used to.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you get used to it?
You know, I don't think that you
or
ever.
Do you?
I was going to say, I don't think that you ever get used to it. And I mean, I don't know when this is going to air, but yesterday was actually his birthday. And so it's just one of those things that, you know, you look at it and I don't think that you ever get used to them being gone. I think that you accept it. I think that you kind of just understand that there must be a reason. You know, I'm a big believer in karma, that everything happens for a reason. And I feel like his life has had a huge ripple effect on tons of things around him, despite the fact that he was never able to say a single word. And so I just look at it like, you know, I try and accept the fact that his life brought a lot of good to the world, even if he doesn't know that. And I try and take some solace in that I don't know where we go when we leave here, but I figure he's got to have a better hand there than he did here.
Yeah. I mean, which also leads us to, you know, what you did to try and sort of like tap into the goodness and collect it and share it, you know. So I saw when you wrote about his passing at the end of last year, and then I guess it was around April where you wrote something where it's like, hey, you know, here are 11 things, you know, that I learned and that I want to share. And that led to this keynote where you basically took those and shared it with thousands of people in a huge audience. So, so I'd love to kind of go through those things.